I'm now going to make a chicken escalope, which is just a sort of big, thin, posher version of a breaded chicken burger, which is like a large chicken nugget. Quite straightforward to make. We're going to fry it. So the thinner it is, the faster it's going to cook. Now I'm going to need a little bit of oil for the frying. You can do them in the oven and you can cook them in spray oil, it's up to you. Need 1 egg. I've got a heaped tablespoon of flour with some salt and pepper added. Got 1 chicken breast, so that'll make 2 escalopes, and some dried breadcrumbs. So you can use fresh breadcrumbs if you'd prefer. The first step is to crack the egg into a basin and beat that, so that's ready for dipping the chicken into later on. So using a fork, beat it until it's nice and liquid with no chunks. So when you think your egg is done enough, if you can do that and there's no lumps of white catching in your fork, then that's done. Then I'm going to take my flour, salt and pepper, I'm going to mix them together and put them onto a plate ready for later. Just get all these things ready before you start handling raw chicken. The breadcrumbs are also going to go onto the plate, and I'm going to use the same plate that I've had the flour on, so I'm going to leave them in the tub or the bag, whatever they're in for the moment. So the chicken's next, and what I'm going to do is to thin it out. Now if you're doing a proper escalope, you would keep it whole and you'd batter it out with a meat hammer or a rolling pin, and you'd make it really big and thin. So I'm going to cut it in half rather than do that, because if you're having it as a burger, it's going to be too big for the roll. So what I'm going to do, if you can see the thickness of it, it's quite deep. That would take quite a long time to cook. So I'm going to start by putting the knife in the thick end. Keep your hand flat on top, and then keep your knife level and steady and cut all the way through, so you've got 2 thinner pieces of chicken. Now you've still got a slightly thicker end and a thinner end, so we're going to do a little bit of flattening out in a minute, just to even it so it cooks all at the same speed. To thin them out, I put cling film over it. You can put it under as well, it's up to you. And I'm going to gently, but keeping the rolling pin quite level, give it a good smack, and that will flatten it out. So the aim is for this thicker end to end up a similar thickness to the other end and cook easier. So you can see already that's quite a bit bigger than the first one, the one I haven't done yet. Don't wallop it too heavily, especially if it's whacking in the middle. It will break. So you need to be quite gentle and sort of persuade it to be a bit bigger. So I think that will do. Take off the cling film. Obviously that goes straight in the bin. And then you should be able to see that it's still in one piece, that it's nicely thinned out. You can do a little bit more if you wanted to, but I'm happy with that. So my next step is going to be to dust them in flour. That's going to season it a little. It's also going to help the egg to stick in the next step, because if you've got wet chicken and a wet egg, it's just going to fall off. Just shake off the excess. Get back on the board for the moment. You can see I've got plenty of flour, so any leftover is going to go in the bin, because obviously it's had raw chicken on it. Just shake it off, and that flour is now going to go in the bin, and without washing the plate, so I want it dry, I'm going to use the same plate for my breadcrumbs. Now if you put too many on and end up not using them, they've got to go in the bin. because they've had raw egg and raw chicken on them. So if you put on what you think might do, you can top up, but you're not going to save any that you used that you didn't actually need. Okay, so it'll keep for ages in the tub, but it has to go in the bin once it's been on the plate. I've put my egg in a slightly bigger basin, or you could put it onto a plate or a shallow bowl. If you were doing chicken nuggets, the small bowl would have been fine. So what I now need to do is gently lower that egg in, turn it over, do the other side, try and drip off excess egg, and then I'm going to lay it in the breadcrumbs and then use my other hand, which is dry, to coat it. And then I'm gonna turn it over, just press it in, especially if you've got quite chunky breadcrumbs, it'll help them to stick. Now you can double dip if you want to. You could do all of this again, see how much egg you've got, see how much breadcrumbs you've got. So that will do. And again, I can still go back on the raw chicken board, raw meat board, because I haven't cooked it. Turn it over. Flatten up the breadcrumbs, ready for the next one. So you're trying to use one hand to dip in the egg, it's quite mucky, and one hand stays nice and dry, which makes it a bit easier. Now at this point, you don't have to cook it immediately. You could chill it, it'll help the breadcrumbs to stick on a bit better. If you are going to cook it, you need to get your pan hot and get your oil on ready. So just going to show you by double dipping it. You can redo this and you have an extra crunchy layer. Yeah, I used the wrong hand then and it's really sticky. So that's just using up the leftover bit of crumb that I had. There you go. I think the other one's got plenty. So that is ready to cook. So I'm going to totally clean down before getting on with any cooking. Okay, so ready to start cooking. A medium to high heat. So they want to sizzle as they go in. I'm going to warm the pan a little before I put oil in. Now it's totally up to you how much oil you use. They are going to cook quicker if there's a little bit more oil. You need enough to coat the bottom of the pan, and like we've done before, just use your hand just to feel the heat a few inches above the base of the pan. You don't want to be actually going down into the pan, so it's level with the top. So when the pan's nice and hot, get the oil in. So like I said, it's about a tablespoon. It's enough to coat the bottom of the pan, and swirl it around. As it gets hotter, it'll run faster because it's becoming more liquid. Now we're not going to put the chicken in straight away, because if you put it into a cold pan, cold oil is just going to wash the crumbs off, rather than start to set the egg and cook the breadcrumbs in place. So again, we're looking for a bit of heat coming off it. Even if you have to start off high and then turn the heat down, that's fine. And I'm going to test if the oil is ready. If you look at it against the light, you can see it'll start to have a bit of a sort of shiny shimmer. So once you start to get that, get one crumb that's fallen off my chicken, drop it in. At the moment, I know that oil isn't hot enough because that crumb didn't start to sizzle. I'm going to fish that one out. Give it a little bit longer to start to heat. As this chicken is quite thin, it is going to cook fairly quickly. We're looking at a couple of minutes per side. Try the next bit of oil, crumb, and I can see that's just starting to sizzle. Only just. By the time I fish that out, that's going to be ready. You can probably see it now moving about. So with the chicken, easiest way, give your oil a little swirl as well, sometimes it levels to the edges. Pick it up with a fork, lower it in. Don't throw it in and don't drop it in towards you, because you want that oil to stay in the pan, not to splash. Obviously that could hurt. And it should start to sizzle nice and gently. You want the oil underneath the chicken. Give a little swirl, give it a little shake, but otherwise I'm going to leave it alone for about 2 minutes and then I'll check the underneath. That's had about 2 minutes now, so what I'm going to do is to use the fork to pick it up and carefully turn it over. I don't want to be splashing it down, and that's the sort of colour we're looking for. Give it a little shake around the pan just to soak up some of that oil. And what I've got ready now is the plate I used earlier has been washed, and I'm going to put some kitchen roll on it to soak up any excess grease when they come out of the pan. Point, you need to be careful you don't cook them too quickly because they'll still be pink in the middle. If you've hammered them quite thin, they'll cook faster, obviously. What I've done now is I've turned it down quite low just to make sure that they have enough time without over browning and burning. If you're really not sure that they're done, go to the thickest part and use a knife and fork. Just cut a little slit, have a look inside, and I can see now that's juicy and white, there's no pink. So I'm going to switch off. I'm going to take it off the heat, leave it in the pan for a minute to relax, and then I'm going to take them out, put it onto my kitchen roll, leave them to cool for a little while before eating.